Mom made me let my cousin stay for free. He threw parties, drank my wine, and told his mom I should cook and clean for him. The fridge door swung open, revealing a crime scene of my own making, or rather, my cousin's. 3 bottles of my imported wine, each one carefully chosen for a work event I'd been planning for weeks, sat empty on the middle shelf. Takeout boxes, half-eaten and leaking sauce, were shoved between my neatly labeled leftovers. The smell of greasy fried rice hit me like a punch. I knew right away my cousin had his friends over again. The missing wine stung, and the mess made my blood boil, but what pushed me over the edge was what I overheard him saying on the phone to his mom while I stood frozen in the hallway. My cousin moved into my apartment 2 months ago, and it was never my idea. The whole thing started with a phone call from my mom. She was crying, her voice shaky, saying he had nowhere else to go. He'd been kicked out of his last place, something about unpaid rent and complaints from neighbors. She said he was trying to get back on his feet, that he just needed a stable place to stay while he figured things out. My apartment, a 2-bedroom I'd worked hard to afford, had an extra room I wasn't using. She latched onto that fact like it was a lifeline. I told her no at first. I liked my space, my routine, my quiet. I'd spent years building a life where I could come home and not deal with anyone else's chaos. But she kept pushing. She said it was temporary, just a few weeks, maybe a month. She said he wouldn't be a burden, that he'd respect my space. She even brought up how she'd helped me when I was starting out, subtly twisting the guilt until I felt like I owed her this. I caved, against every instinct screaming at me to hold my ground. I told her he could stay, but only for a short time. She thanked me like I'd saved his life, and I hung up feeling like I'd just signed away my peace. When my cousin first moved in, he put on a good show. He carried his bags into the spare room, thanked me repeatedly, and promised he'd be out soon. He said he was looking for a job and wouldn't be any trouble. He even offered to help with chores, though he never followed through. For the first week, he kept things low-key. He stayed in his room most of the time, played his music quietly, and didn't leave dishes in the sink. I thought maybe my mom was right, that this could work temporarily. But that phase didn't last. By the second week, the mask came off. He started acting like the apartment was his own. He'd blast music late at night, the bass thumping through the walls while I tried to sleep. He'd leave his shoes in the middle of the living room, his dirty laundry on the bathroom floor, and his dishes piled up in the sink. I work from home, running a small graphic design business, and his noise became a constant problem. I'd be on client calls, trying to sound professional, while his laughter or video games bled through the walls. I started wearing noise-canceling headphones just to get through my workday. He'd invite friends over without asking, and I'd come home to strangers sprawled on my couch, eating my snacks, and using my TV like it was their personal entertainment system. I tried to set boundaries early on. I asked him to keep the noise down, and let me know if he was having people over. He'd nod, say he understood, but nothing changed. The apartment started feeling less like my home and more like a hostel I was stuck managing. I'd spend my evenings cleaning up after him, wiping down counters, throwing out empty chip bags, and scrubbing dishes he'd left to crust over. He never offered to help, and when I brought it up, he'd shrug and say he'd get to it later. Later never came. I started noticing little things missing, snacks I'd bought, a bottle of soda, even some of my toiletries. I didn't want to accuse him outright, but the pattern was clear. He was treating my place like a free-for-all, and I was starting to dread coming home. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that he'd be out soon, but 2 weeks turned into a month, and he showed no signs of leaving. He hadn't mentioned job hunting since he moved in, and when I asked, he changed the subject. My patience was wearing thin, and I was starting to realize my mom's promise of a short stay was falling apart. I felt trapped in my own home, and the worst was yet to come. I reached my breaking point when I came home one evening and found the front door wide open. My cousin had friends over again, and one of them had left it unlocked and ajar all night. Anyone could have walked in. My laptop, my work equipment, everything I'd worked for was just sitting there, vulnerable. I confronted him the next morning, keeping my voice calm but firm. I told him the door being left open was unacceptable and that he needed to be more responsible. He rolled his eyes and said I was overreacting. He claimed it wasn't a big deal, that nothing had been stolen, so I should relax. That's when things got worse. He started having friends over even when I wasn't home. I'd come back from a rare errand to find my living room trashed, empty cans on the coffee table, crumbs on the couch, and my sink full of dishes. Then I noticed my wine was disappearing. I'd bought 3 bottles of imported wine for a special client dinner I was hosting to celebrate a big project. They weren't cheap, and I'd stored them in the fridge to keep them ready. One by one they vanished. I found the empty bottles in the recycling bin, no note, no apology. I brought it up with him, explaining how much the wine cost and why it mattered. He laughed, called me uptight, and said I should have labeled them if they were so important. His friends were drinking my stuff, and he didn't care. The mess, the noise, the disrespect, it was all piling up, and I was done playing nice. One afternoon, I was in the hallway grabbing my mail when I overheard him on the phone with his mom. His voice carried through the thin walls. He was complaining about me, saying I was cold and unwelcoming, that I wasn't treating him like family. He said the apartment was always dusty, that I never cooked, and that he shouldn't have to clean since I owned the place. Then he went further, saying I should be making meals for both of us because I had a real kitchen now. He painted himself as some victim, stuck in a hostile environment, while I was the bad guy for not waiting on him hand and foot. His words hit me hard, not because they were true, but because he was twisting everything to make me sound like the problem. I stood there, gripping my keys, feeling my anger boil over. He wasn't just freeloading, he was actively trying to guilt me into doing more for him. I realized then that this wasn't just about his laziness or his friends, it was about his entitlement, and it was only going to get worse. Later that same day, my mom called me. Her voice was sharp, like she was already upset before I even picked up. She said she'd just spoken to my cousin, and he told her I wasn't making him feel welcome. She said I needed to be nicer, that he was going through a tough time and needed family support. She brought up how I had a stable job and a nice apartment, implying I should be sharing more of it with him. She suggested I lead by example, cook dinners, clean the place, involve him in household tasks to make him feel included. She said if I showed him how to be responsible, he'd step up. I was stunned. I told her I wasn't his parent or his landlord by choice. He was a grown man, almost 30, freeloading in my home. I explained how he'd been disrespecting my space, inviting friends over, drinking my wine, and leaving messes. I told her about the open front door and how unsafe it made me feel. She brushed it off, saying he was just adjusting and that I was being too hard on him. She insisted I had a responsibility to help him because we were family. I pushed back, saying I'd already done more than enough by letting him stay rent-free. The call ended with her saying she was disappointed in me, and I hung up feeling like I'd been ambushed. My own mother was siding with him, ignoring everything I told her. It felt like a betrayal, like my home and my boundaries didn't matter. I started to see that this wasn't just about my cousin's behavior. It was about my mom enabling him and expecting me to fall in line. A few days later, I'd had enough. I sat my cousin down and told him he had to move out. I kept it straightforward. His behavior was unacceptable, and I couldn't keep living like this. I gave him a deadline, 2 weeks to find a new place. He didn't take it well. His face turned red, and he started yelling, saying I was selfish and turning my back on family. He said I was acting like I was better than him because I had a job and a nice place. He stormed out, slamming the door, and I heard him on the phone with his mom within minutes. Sure enough, she called me that evening, her voice shaking with anger. She accused me of abandoning my cousin, someone who just needed guidance. She said I was being cruel and that I should at least help him find a new place to live. I told her I'd given him 2 weeks, which was generous considering how he treated my home. She said I was breaking her heart, and hung up. I felt a mix of guilt and relief, but I knew I couldn't back down. My apartment, my sanity, my life, they weren't up for negotiation anymore. Over the next 2 weeks, my cousin made no effort to find a new place. He stayed in his room most of the time, but the tension in the apartment was suffocating. He'd leave passive-aggressive notes on the fridge, like reminders to buy more milk, as if I was his personal shopper. His friends stopped coming over, probably because he told them I was kicking him out. I found out he was still talking to his mom, feeding her stories about how unfair I was being. She called me twice more, each time angrier than the last. She said I was tearing the family apart, that I was too focused on my own comfort to care about anyone else. She brought up how she'd always been there for me, how she'd sacrificed so much when I was younger. It felt like she was trying to guilt me into letting him stay forever. I held firm, repeating that he had 2 weeks and that was final. I started locking my valuables in my bedroom and kept a closer eye on my things. I even hid the last bottle of wine I had left in a cabinet he never checked. Those 2 weeks dragged on, every day a test of my patience. I'd come home from client meetings to find new messes, spilled coffee on the counter, trash overflowing, dishes piled up. It was like he was trying to punish me for setting boundaries. On the last day, he packed his bags in silence, threw them over his shoulder, and walked out without a word. I stood in the doorway, watching him leave, feeling a weight lift off my chest. My mom sent me a text that night, saying she couldn't believe I'd gone through with it. She said she needed time before we could talk again. It hurt, but I wasn't surprised. After my cousin left, I changed the locks the next morning. I wasn't taking any chances. The first night in my quiet apartment felt like a gift. I walked through every room, checking that everything was where it should be. The fridge had only my food, the living room was spotless, and my wine, well, what was left of it, was safe. I spent the weekend cleaning, scrubbing every surface, erasing every trace of him. My mom still hasn't called me back, and I'm not sure when she will. I heard from an aunt that my cousin moved in with a friend, but no one's given me details, and I haven't asked. My apartment is mine again, and I'm not letting anyone take that away. I've started setting firmer boundaries, even with family. I learned the hard way that saying no isn't selfish, it's survival. For the first time in months, I can breathe in my own home, and that's worth more than any guilt trip my mom can throw at me.